Hey guys, welcome back. If I had tried that about a week and a half ago, I would have fell straight through. So if you want to see how we made that trunk be able to support my full body weight, make sure to stick around. If you guys are familiar with these cars, or if you've worked on them before, you know that the tail pan is notorious for rotting out, and this car is no exception. Pop the trunk, give you guys an idea of what it looks like in there. I promise it's not better. Yep. Huge gap gone there. I could fit a whole mess of stuff in between the tail pan and the trunk. It's not good. It never seems to end with this car, but I knew that when I bought it. So that's the plan for today. Patch the trunk, new tail pan in. Might be able to get the trunk lid to close. We got both doors to close now, so getting there. Okay, so first thing I think I'm going to do is take the bumper off. We'll get the taillight lenses out of there and just give ourselves a little bit of a better idea of what little we have to work with. Kind of get a better look at how bad this thing actually is. You can see how badly it sags in the center there. Obviously, you have a body bolt back here, and there's a brace that goes underneath the tail pan. That is no longer with us. This one is there in spirit. I'm going to end up cutting, or actually trying to get that bolt out. Cut the rest of that brace. Empty the trunk, get the taillight lenses out. And then I'll show you the patch that we're going to put in here. But I'll keep cleaning this up. I think they sell these panels that kind of wrap around and go into the tail pan. So we're going to need those. Oh, this car just gets better and better. All right, let me keep working on getting this stuff removed, and I'll bring you back when that's all out. Okay, with the majority of that stuff out of the way, I'm going to cut the stock jack mounts out. I'm going to cut the spare tire well out, and we'll start working back and knocking some of the trunk pan out so we can get our new panel in and lined up. Still not 100% sure if I'm just going to do the patch. That's the piece there. It's like the last 10 inches of the pan. That'll repair the majority of the rot. But I'm still a little concerned with how soft the center of the trunk is. So I guess we'll find out a little bit more once I get some of this cut out. Okay, driver's side, I have the flange cleaned up. I hit that with some weld-through primer. So now our patch and our brace can sit in there, and we'll be able to weld that up. However, on the passenger side, we are not as fortunate. You can see there's some pretty severe rot throughout there. And then even as it comes down on the inside of the quarter panel, there's really nothing to weld that too, and we need to add a little bit of strength to that. As you can see, this entire thing moves a little bit. Probably going to cut and follow this body line and just come straight across here, and then we'll bend a panel. We're going to have to make something, but we'll bend a panel to fit in there, and it's going to have to be a couple of pieces because it kind of fits the shape of where the tail pan would go in that corner down here. So that's going to require a decent amount of work, some cutting, welding, bending, but I'd really like to tie everything together and add some strength into the back of this car. So I'm going to start taking some measurements. Still have a nice piece of 18 gauge sheet metal, so I'm going to have to come up with something. I think they do sell complete inner quarter panels. Very expensive, and unfortunately right now it's just not in my budget. So we're going to have to make something work. Okay, patch panel is welded in, obviously not finished. And the reason I didn't do that is because I'm sure that it's going to have to get moved a little bit once the trunk patch and the brace are in. But at least for now, that panel is whole, and we'll go back once everything is done inside here, and we'll clean that up and finish weld it. But for now, we have a little bit of strength in there. All right, now this is our new trunk pan brace. This runs across the back of the frame. You have a body bolt here, body bolt there. Those are the ones that were not really doing anything before. And you could also tell how badly these body bushings were sagging because the trunk pan is currently resting on the shackle for the leaf springs. That'll get addressed once the body comes off the frame. But for now, I'd like to get the back of the car whole again onto our trunk pan. So I put the brace on the bottom of the pan and just marked, you could see hopefully the Sharpie lines. You could see where it's going to mate up to the brace. What I'm going to do now is just go and drill a couple of holes in there. So once we get this situated in the car and in the correct spot, I'm going to just throw 2 bolts through the body bushings and make sure this is aligned. We can plug weld that so that piece is solid to the brace. And then we're going to have to come up with something to lift this trunk pan up, especially where it's sagging here. So it'll meet that patch and we weld everything together. So I'm going to I'm going to drill those out. And once that's done, I'll paint this and the underside of that pan with weld through primer. This way everything is protected, and then we can start fitting it in the car, get that welded to the brace, and then we can start the nightmare of getting this pan flush with our new patch. All right, so we drilled out the patch. We have everything primed. I think it's time to try and slide it in the car. I have the brace clamped to the frame. I do have a bolt through each body bolt hole and the bushing. Contour of the floor matches up pretty well. All of the body lines. Obviously, we're going to have to do some work here and there. But as far as fitment inside the car, I'd say that's pretty good. So with that being done, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start plug welding the brace to our patch. Get that nice and solid in there. I'm going to throw a nice weld on the gap here. Now, from the factory, they are plug welded from the trunk pan to the inner quarter panels. I may end up going underneath and just drilling a couple holes in that flange and plug welding it. But for now, we have pretty good metal here. Some weld in there. Get this nice and strong in the car. This side, same thing. We're going to end up welding to that contoured patch panel that we made. This, even without it being welded, doesn't shift back and forth anymore. So that is definitely a good thing. That's what we want. So I'm going to put the camera down. We're going to start welding this in. And then once that's done, we can start moving our flanges in, getting those welded. We're going to add some, or we're going to have to add some patches. This side, I did pretty decent on the cut so that I could just cut flush and just weld that seam up as we go. Obviously, we're going to have to remove the rest of the flange for the spare tire well. I'm going to end up putting just a block off panel in there. And yeah, like I said, we're going to have to make a little bit of a patch there to kind of bridge that gap. But looking pretty good. I ended up ordering patches for the lower quarter underneath the taillight. So those will fill in this area here and kind of complete the opening for the trunk. And then once we get our tail pan, which I should have in a couple of days, we can put all those together. And then hopefully that'll add some strength to the trunk. Maybe we can get the trunk to close. The factory trunk latch, this is the old tail pan that we cut out, is not good. But the car did come with an extra tail pan. And believe it or not, the trunk latch on that one looks pretty good. So hopefully we'll be in business there. Yeah, that's pretty much it for now. I'm going to get to welding. And hopefully soon we'll have a complete trunk pan. Okay, with our initial trunk patch in, I have it welded to the brace. We still have our bolts through the frame where the body bolts would be. And originally, my plan was to patch just this and then try and weld to the remaining trunk pan. Plans have changed. I was able to weld it to this, but the metal it's just rotted all the way up, and it's going to take more time to patch it. It's not going to be as strong. So I ordered another patch section for the trunk. That should be here hopefully in a couple of days. And there it is. So with this panel, we'll be able to replace all of the center structure of the floor, and that's where your gas tank mounts are going to be, both here and then up front right before right after the drop down. And we really want to make sure that those are in good shape. So I've already marked this new panel out. You can see the line across. So that will butt up against our new patch we put in earlier. And then up front, I'm probably going to end up trimming it a little bit before that wraparound up near the spare tire well, because that's all in good shape up there. And then I also might just cut diagonally across there to avoid cutting above the frame rail. And also, it's got a little bit of surface rust on it, but that section of the floor is in good shape. So I'm going to take this back out. I'll trim down what we need, and then we can put it back in the car and start marking our lines out where it needs to get cut, and then we can remove all the old stuff. Okay, I trimmed out the usable section, or at least what I want to use, and that is going to cover pretty much all of the problem areas in the center of the trunk, especially, like I said, on top of the fuel tank. So you see, we should have a pretty nice seam here up against our panel that we replaced already. On this side, there is one little problem area there where the floor is a little soft. But if I can weld here and in front of it, once that's done, I should be able to just cut that out and make a small flat section to finish that up. Along the back, that metal is all solid. We won't have any issues there. Same thing with kind of in front of the spare tire well. It's all good metal up there. So I'm going to mark where this panel is going to go. We'll start cutting that out, and then once that's out, we can clean up all of the edges and start getting this panel in to weld it up. And here's what we have so far. So I got the pan placed in the car. I started welding it. A little bit of a gap in the back there, and I think that's because the old pan was just so weak and had so much flex in it that when I went to weld the new panel in, or went to place the new panel, it sagged a little bit. So I'm going to have to make something up for a couple spots back there, but that shouldn't be too bad. And then there's one other piece right there, and the good thing about buying that patch panel and not using all of it is that I have a nicely contoured piece so it'll meet that lip inside the trunk. So I'm going to cut that out now. We'll weld that in, and then I'll just continue welding this panel in. And this goes back to what I said earlier, that, and I'm regretting it now, sometimes, well, the patch panels are always cheaper, but it ends up being a lot more work. Like if I had done the entire trunk pan, would have basically just cut the whole thing out, cleaned up the seams along the inner quarters, the wheel wells. There's another lip that overlaps the floor, and basically clamp it together and plug weld it. Instead, I'm doing probably 3 or 4 feet of linear welding, and it's taking forever. But the good news is that when it's done, we should have a nice solid all metal trunk floor. So I'm going to get back to it, and I'll bring you guys back when this is all welded in, ground down, and we're going to treat this to some new seam sealer, some rust preventative paint, and get this in one color, and should be a big difference. All right, so here's what we have. I have that center patch completely welded in. I sanded down all of the surface rust on the inner quarter panels and the wheel wells, and just treated it with that Rust-Oleum rust converter. Everything you see in the army green primer is the fresh metal that we welded in. Once everything dries, I may scuff a couple more spots, and we'll apply some seam sealer, and we can get a final coat of black paint. Now, I didn't do underneath the package tray just yet, because I want to really be able to get on there with a wire wheel. So I think I'm going to end up doing that when the floor comes out of here, because that seat brace is going to have to come out anyway. So I'll have a little bit better access then. But yeah, next step for this is going to be seam sealer. Final coat of, I think we're just going to do black. Some gloss black paint, and trunk should be looking good. I actually sat in the trunk before to grind underneath and in the back. It didn't fall through. So good sign. But much, much better than what it was. I think tomorrow or the next day, I'll focus on welding the quarter patches in. And I picked up a tail panel today as well. So once we get that all in and welded up, I just have to transfer the hood latch and striker to the new tail panel, which I have down there. That's going to do it for me tonight. Like I said, either tomorrow or the next day, we'll be back out here and keep plugging away. All right, so with our trunk, pretty much done. Obviously, still have to do seam sealer and final coat of paint. Next thing we're going to focus on are these quarter panel pieces underneath the taillights. Still have to cut that one out. And then our new tail pan. So I'm going to start trimming that piece out. Once I get that done, we'll just mock it up like this other side here. I have it attached with a vice grip in the back now. I may end up just tack welding that seam and then kind of playing around with the position a little bit to get it where I want it. And then hopefully with all three kind of where I want them, we can start welding that in, and then the back of this car will be done. So I'll start cutting that out, and we can start fitting some panels. Okay, we both patches welded in. I was a little off with the cuts just because it's hard to measure the contour and the height of everything, but I got them pretty close. I have them tacked in a couple of places. They're nice and strong. Before I finish weld those, I have the tail pan basically just resting on here now just to get a visual. And with replacement panels, the end will generally be flanged. And what I mean by that is that little folded over portion there is meant to fit behind the factory piece and line up and weld right in. They never do. But when you have two of them, generally both manufacturers will sort of do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is cut both flanged pieces off both panels, leave myself a little bit of room, and once those are trimmed off, I'm hoping that this will basically just fit right in. So we'll see how that goes. So I'll get started with that. Like I said, it's pretty easy to see the line where I'm going to cut. There. Another one there. I think that'll work. Not too sure, but we'll find out together. Can't be any worse than what was on here. Okay, our tail pan is just about ready to go in. I hit the ends with some weld through primer. Right in the center that's going to be covered and not seen, I just hit with some metal etching primer just to keep that protected. And yeah, I think that's it's about time to start welding this in. I'm going to fit this up and start buzzing it together. About an hour and a half later, after some welding and some grinding, the new tail pan is finally in. Back of the car is nice and sturdy now, all welded together. I still have some more welding to do on here, but for now I just wanted to get it protected with some primer. In addition to that, I'm still going to have to remove the trunk latch and the locator. So the striker pin on the trunk lid itself. We're going to have to position that and weld it in the car, but we'll probably do that closer to when we do the body work and the finish work on this car, because for now, I've said it before, but I just want to get this car structurally solid so when we pull it off the frame, it doesn't fold in half. And it was definitely at risk for doing that before we did all this work. So last step for this video is going to be apply some seam sealer to the trunk. So we scraped out all of the old stuff. Then we'll go ahead, get a fresh coat of paint on the trunk, and on to the next step. All right, for seam sealer, I'm just using generic brand. It's a brush on from a body shop supply place that's pretty close to my house. So I'm going to do all the edges where it meets the inner quarter panels and all of the seams that we welded in. Make everything nice and watertight in here. And then once that's dry, we can throw a coat of paint on this and the trunk will be done. All done. Still have to paint it. I was going to do it now, but I realized that I still have to weld a couple of things in here, but one more piece of the puzzle done. Pretty happy with that, how that came out. It'll look much better once it's got a nice fresh coat of paint on it. As always, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the progress on this car, please consider subscribing, and we'll catch you in the next one.